Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of They Say. My name is Allison McFarland, founder and CEO of Allison McFarland, Inc. And today's episode is truly something that I am beyond excited about. I just want to be clear that AMI and They Say is a nonpartisan platform, but we are excited to have real conversations with real people making real impact in the community. I am so honored today to have Mr. Christian Menfee himself here. Christian, thank you for saying yes to me.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. I'm going to call you Young Malcolm himself.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Now, do you get that often?
I do. I showed my oldest son, 3.5 years old, a picture that we have on the wall of Malcolm X, but we had taken it down for some reason. And I said, "Who is that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Daddy." I was like, "Oh my goodness, man, you got to chill." But I do get a lot. And I think it's just the haircut and the glasses. That's pretty much.
Okay. I could see that. I could see it with the look. Now, as we think about the impact of a Malcolm X and just what you've done in such a young age. So if my memory serves me correctly, you are the youngest African-American attorney in Harris County. Is that correct?
Yeah, so youngest person and first African-American elected to serve as county attorney. You know, Harris County has been around for like 180 years. Wow. So the fact that we've had decade after decade, generation after generation, and it had only been white men who had been in this job. So it's a blessing, man. God just blessed me in 2020, got elected, and been serving ever since.
So for our audience that doesn't know you, and I'm grateful because I really don't know much about you, so I think it's going to be even a better conversation. But for those who don't know you and what you represent, give us a little bit more about who is Christian? Who are you?
I'm just a guy from Houston. So I grew up in Houston. I went to elementary school on the north side of town. I went to middle school at Wonderlick. Shout out to Wonderlick Wildcats. And then went to Klein Forest for high school. Was there a couple of years, played football there. And then my family moved across town to A-Leaf, which if you grew up outside of the Loop, Klein area to A-Leaf is like two different cities. Like it's nothing like the north side of town. It's different lingo. You know, people hang out in different ways. Like everything was different on the south side. But went to A-Leaf Hastings and graduated from there. So my family, you know, we didn't have any people who went to college when I was coming up, right? So I did my FAFSA on my own, applied to college on my own, and ended up going out to San Antonio for college. But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy who grew up in a working class family here in town, military family.
Yes.
And ultimately, you know, the cards aligned and ended up in the position I'm in today.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's kind of unpack this journey. So coming from A-Leaf, first you started in Klein, then you went to A-Leaf. So when I moved from San Diego, I just picked an apartment and I happened to live in A-Leaf and I was so petrified because no one told me that A-Leaf was an up-and-coming community when I moved here about 15 years ago. So it's very interesting and I was a little scared, but How was that for you growing up in that area? Yeah,
it was definitely a culture shock. Yes. I mean, there were issues that were similar across schools, but there were other things that just kind of blew me away immediately. So I'll give you a good example. I was a free lunch kid, free lunch and reduced lunch, coming up in middle school and high school. The first thing I noticed was that the food at the Klein schools was just way better. Oh. So, you know, we used to have at Klein Forest, you would have like a hot wing basket. It was, you know, chicken wings, fries, the whole nine. That was not available when I went to school at the new district. It was also way less diverse. So Klein Forest, you had folks of all different races who were there. At my high school, it wasn't relatively diverse, right? I mean, it was mostly Black and Latino. But, you know, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I loved my experience at Hastings because what I saw was for the first time in my high school experience, teachers were paying attention to me.
Oh, wow.
I mean, A-Leaf, you know, was a very, like, well-run district. So I stopped playing football my junior year, and I had a teacher who said to me, like, "Hey, you're a class clown. You keep talking during class and getting other people to talk and make jokes and stuff. You should go do debate because you really like to talk, and you especially like to talk while I'm talking, right?"
Okay.
So I went and did debate and just had, like, incredible success. I mean, I was a state finalist, a national qualifier, and I would have never known that I had those skills had that teacher not paid attention to me. It was one of the first times in my life that a teacher had just paid attention to me and said, "Hey, you have these skills." So I loved A-Leaf. Wouldn't have traded it for the world.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you end up in San Antonio? So how did that transition go?
I applied to like 6 or 7 schools. Again, I didn't know anything about college. Yeah. It's funny, I talked to some of my peers and they grew up watching The Cosby Show in a different world. I didn't watch any of that. I think I just couldn't relate. right?
Yeah.
When you saw some of the images that came from the Cosby Show and the life that they were living, I just couldn't relate to that. So I didn't know anything about HBCUs,
Yes.
none of that. I was applying to colleges, and for some reason, the only school I really knew about was UT. So I said to myself, I want to go to UT. That's going to be the goal. But I also wasn't doing homework. So, you got some real troubles with that.
Okay.
So I applied to UT, and they put me in a program called the CAP program, which is you go to a sister school for a year, and then you can automatically transfer up if you meet the GPA threshold. One of my best friends from the Klein area, his mother had passed away from cancer.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't really know what he was going to do with his life. And so I said, hey, look, I got into UTSA. I'm going to go up there for a year and then go up to UT. Just let me do your application for college, and maybe you'll get in. So he got into UTSA.
Okay.
We ended up going out there. And then after a year, by then I was, pre-pledged in a fraternity. I was involved in student government, so I wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
But it was legit seen initially to me as a pathway to get to UT. But then I got out there and made so many friends that I was like, I'm going to stick around.
That's interesting. So let's kind of talk more about, because you have such a non-traditional route.
Yeah,
like
big time.
a lot of people I know that are in the same spectrum as you, they are huge HBC goers. Like they are the Morehouses, the Spellmans. And to hear that you didn't go the non-traditional route, but look at where you've ended up today, how has that really helped you in your growth in your career?
Yeah, I mean, look, I now interact with so many folks who went to HBCUs, and I think it's such a powerful thing because of the way that they view Black culture, Black history, the appreciation and the richness that they see in it was something that I wouldn't have really learned going to a predominantly white school here in Texas. But coming out, I just didn't know anything about those schools. I didn't know anything about those opportunities. I had never heard of Morehouse, any of this stuff. And ultimately, when I got to college, I just had a really well-rounded experience. So I joined my fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, and we had enough people to charter a chapter at the school. You have to have 8 people active to charter a chapter. So when I crossed, we finally had 8 people. So we chartered a chapter.
Oh, wow.
So I was the first president in the history of the chapter out of UTSA. And I'll tell you right now, if you can manage a group of 19 to 22-year-old boys in college, you can lead anybody. So I learned so much about leadership, about interacting with my peers, about how to motivate people from being the president of the Bros in college. But at the same time, I was serving on student governments. I was elected as like freshman senator, then business college senator, the whole nine. So I loved UTSA. I had a great time. I mean, it's a commuter school, so you wouldn't see as many people active on campus at parties, whatever. But it's just, I wouldn't change for the world. I learned so much, and it just really helped shape who I am today from going to that school.
It's interesting. So let's talk about this, because I think that's a fun point to bring up, especially in that D9 space, about how joining these particular organizations really help you cultivate your leadership and just your networking. Can you dive a little bit more into that for me?
Yeah, so, when we created our chapter, out the gate, we had the highest GPA on campus, right?
And that's almost unheard of for Omega.
Oh my
so
God.
I just want to acknowledge that.
All the organizations have like their stereotypes, right? One of the beautiful things about chartering a chapter was we got to create it for our own.
Right.
And, we had older brothers who were in San Antonio area and then folks in nearby schools who would come down and we would learn from them. But out the gate, we had the highest GPA, just a bunch of like good guys who were focused on the right stuff, who were trying to move in the right direction. But I would have never guessed when I first was thinking about joining, and when I started the process of joining, I would have never guessed that I was going to be president. And then eventually I went on to be the representative of all the undergraduate chapters in Texas. And then a couple years after that, I won International Omega Man of the Year as an undergraduate. And I would have never guessed that the trajectory would have been like that. But just getting in and having to deal with the bros, I mean, just, little bitty stuff like every semester your GPA needs to be X, right? And if your GPA is not X, then we got to figure out some sort of like incentive structure, the carrot or the stick, right? And as a 19-year-old guy, because I took over as president when I was 19, and not knowing anything about the world, not knowing anything about leadership, it grew me so much. So by the time I started applying to law schools, a lot of my experience there really helped me in that application process because I was able to show like, hey, I've led not just anybody, but I've led the Qs as a 19, 20, 21-year-old. But it was a great experience. Just prepared me for so much in life. And at the time, I probably didn't understand what was growing inside of me from that experience. But looking back, I mean, that was a pivotal moment in my life.
That's powerful. And that's why I think I am biased, but I do think that joining a D9 organization done right can
Yeah.
definitely change the trajectory of one's life
Yeah.
and open up a lot of opportunities. So I love that, and I thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about law school.
Yeah.
How was that process?
Law school was insane. I didn't know anything about law school.
Right.
The only lawyer I knew growing up was Jack McCoy from Law and Order.
Okay.
And I just remembered, he would be in the courtroom talking all day. And so I set out the path to go to law school because I thought that's what all lawyers did. I
Right.
said, lawyers stand up and talk. Well, if I
Right.
can just stand up and talk, I'll be all right. In college, between running the fraternity chapter, being in student government, hanging out, I was not a particularly involved student in my courses. I would do kind of enough to get by and was smart enough to just kind of figure it out. But I was not deep in homework and stuff.
Okay.
My school had this fantastic program started by Dr. Richard Gambetta. Shout out to Dr. Gambetta if you're watching this. It was a pre-law institute, right?
Okay.
And what it would do is over the course of a summer, you would get legal writing and research. You would take a constitutional law course. You would take a torts course.
Oh, wow.
And then you would take a course on the LSAT, right, which is the
wow.
entry exam
Yeah.
to get into law school. I took that program the summer of 2009. And for the first time in my life, I applied myself. It's okay. I'm going to do the homework. I'm going to do all the reading. And I came out of it with a much higher LSAT score. But also, because of my grades, I was student of the year in the program.
Oh.
There is no way that I would have gotten into the law schools that I got into had I not done that program. And then, so fast forward all these years later, now I'm the county attorney. I've started a similar program for high school students in the Houston area.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we get hundreds of applications from students throughout high schools in Harris County, and we accept 30 kids each year. We teach them about applying to college, applying to law school. We bring in law school professors who go through the Socratic method with them. We teach them how to read cases.
Wow.
We have mock classrooms
Wow.
in the thing. We bring in lawyers, we bring in judges, and importantly, these kids, they're of all different races, colors, creeds, and we have lawyers that we bring in who look like them,
Wow.
who come from the
Which is so
same
important.
background, and tell them, hey,
Yeah.
you're good enough, you can do this. We bring in judges, and the best part is we pay them $15 an hour.
Oh, man.
Because when I was coming up, I worked at HEB Grocery, right?
Yep.
And I'd be pushing
Yep.
carts in the parking lot, and there was no way that I could have taken 3 weeks off of that job in high
Right.
school. I needed that job.
Right.
So all these years later, it's been full circle. But I went through my application process. I applied to a bunch of schools, maybe like 35, 36 schools.
Oh,
wow. Because I said, I didn't do it right coming out of high school into college, but I'm going to do it right this time. I got down to UT Law and a law school out of St. Louis called Washington University in St. Louis. I had never heard of WashU, didn't know anything about it. I kind of thought maybe I didn't want to go to UT because hey, y'all didn't really want me for undergrad,
Right.
so you don't really get me for law school. Then I went to go visit WashU. So I went and visited. It was in St. Louis. It was like February, so it's snowing. And for the folks who haven't seen WashU, it looks like Hogwarts or something. It's like this, or Notre Dame, or it's like
Right.
this regal old, right? So, we pulled up, and I had to buy a pea coat for the first time because
Oh, wow.
I had never been in cold weather like
Wow.
that, really. So we pull up to the building. I go inside. It's one of those like big regal homes, and you come inside, and somebody's waiting for me at the door. He said, "Sir, can I take your jacket?"
Oh, wow.
I kind of looked around like, me? Okay. So he takes my jacket off. They walk me over to this area and say, "Would you like a glass of champagne?" Well, champagne?
Wow.
Hold on. Give me the flute of champagne. I look up, and on the other side of the home, there's like this beautiful fireplace. Somebody's playing the grand piano.
Oh,
I was like, sign me up.
wow.
Where do I go? Sign me up.
Right.
And then the icing on the cake was, in my year, they said, hey, we've already had 40 some odd kids who are African American who have accepted from this class. So from a school that was as good as my school, it is unheard of to have that many black students in the same
wow.
class. So I ended up signing in. And ultimately, we had 51 African Americans in a class of like 275 people.
That's amazing.
But it was the champagne and
the flutes.
the grand,
And the grand piano.
that got me. So.
Wow, that is amazing. So when we think about your trajectory, I hear a lot of firsts and a lot of unknowns, like you just didn't know, you just tried. So what was the root of you just trying the unknown? I feel like you're not afraid to try new things.
Yeah, I think I've always felt a strong sense of duty to navigate stuff, to figure stuff out, and to achieve. So, my parents' upbringing was pretty interesting. My dad, his family grew up right here in Fifth Ward in Houston. When he was a young kid, he was adopted by a family member and went out to Lufkin, Texas.
Oh, wow.
So he was out there tending to a farm, working out in the country. His dad passed away when my dad was only 18, 19 years old. He actually
wow.
died on the docks at the Port of Houston. He was a longshoreman. So, a lot of trauma there, a lot of lack of connection, to the family. And then my mom's side, my mom had 9 or 10 siblings, and they lived in the projects in East St. Louis. Her parents battled, drug abuse, addiction, and mental issues. And so they were in and out of foster care, group homes, the whole nine. And at some point, her family got up and moved to South Central LA. So remember, at the time, Black folks throughout the country thought that LA, it's basically like a black gold rush, right?
Yes.
You move out there, you're going to have better jobs, right? You out there, not far from the beach, not knowing that the cost of living was higher and there's all these other things. And of course, this was also like in the couple decades before the crack epidemic, right? So they get over there, and what my mom found was just despair, right? I mean, gang culture, uncles joining gangs, getting involved in crime. And then her parents were still dealing with those same substance abuse issues. And so my grandmother would, for weeks at a time, live out on the street, and my mom and her siblings were kind of in and out of foster care. So eventually, my mom joined the military when she was 18. And frankly, she did it because they were going to feed you every night and they were going to have a warm bed for you, right? My dad also joined the military. They joined the same branch, the Coast Guard, which you don't really see a ton of, you don't really hear from a bunch of folks saying, I was Coast Guard, right? So they met, and ultimately they had me, my younger sister, and then I have 2 older half-brothers. But from a very young age, I think my parents' view was, you're going to go to college, right? And we don't really have the answers for you, Sway. We don't know how you're going to get there, what it's going to look like, but you got to go to college. You got to do better. And the most important thing I think that happened in my upbringing was when I was in elementary school, my brother was diagnosed with cancer. And I remember very vividly, I stayed the night at a friend's house, and I came home, and my mom had left to go somewhere, and my brother came downstairs, it's my older brother, and his face was swollen. He had a tumor on his face that had just grown overnight. And then they took him to the hospital that day, and he ultimately was diagnosed with leukemia. My mom had left the workforce a few years before, and she was kind of in and out of finding work again. That is when I think she decided she was not going to go back to the workforce, and instead she was going to spend her time caring for my brother, but more importantly, praying for us, right? To try to break generational curses, to better position us to be successful. And looking back, I think that's probably the most important thing that happened in my childhood, because I had a praying mom. I had an attentive mom. And I had a father who was just like a great example of a man who, took care of his family, made the hard decisions. And so I just always felt this sense of like, I don't have a choice, right? I can't fail.
Right.
I must figure out a way to succeed, whatever that's going to look like, because I have people who sacrificed too much for me, who invested too much in me. And I've seen what it's like to not have much. I've seen what it's like to struggle, and I can't have that for my kids.
Wow. That is powerful. And I think if more of us as a community kind of really took the time to look deeper into our family units, we'd have a lot of different, it would definitely change the trajectory of a lot of what is going on now. So I give much respect and props to your parents. That's amazing. And they've done a great job seeing you rocking and rolling out here. So with that being said, and that really laid the foundation for where you are. So let's build on that. So after going through law school, getting the grand piano, this great family unit, but how did you turn that tragedy truly into triumph to get you where you're at today?
Well, a whole lot of stress. So I remember, I think back to like, when you are first in a lot of different stuff, everybody handles it different ways. I now realize when I got older that I just have bad anxiety, and I'll just power through, right? And I've gotten like way better over it with the years, because you start to get better perspective, especially when you have kids. When my wife and I had our kids, now I'm just like, okay, it'll be fine. But I remember my first semester in law school, right? So I get to watch you coming from UTSA, and when the first thing you get up there and you talk to people who have gone to all these other schools, the first thing they tell you is, WashU is like the Harvard of the Midwest. I'm dude, come on. I ain't never heard that before, but okay, fine, I'll take your word for it. But there were kids in my class who went to Harvard undergrad, went to Yale, went to Columbia, all these Ivy Leagues. And law school is a competition, right? You're graded on a curve. So that means if X amount of people do better than you, your grade's just going to be worse, right? Like, not everybody can get the 95. So I get up there and I'm in class with these people, and I'm stressed, right? I only know how to be me. In fact, some of my best friends from law school, and I'm going to have to send them this video because I talk to them all the time. Some of my best friends from law school were like deeply ashamed to be around me when I first got to law school, because I was still rough around the edges. I had been to Bruss for a few years. And
you weren't as polished.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. And, I would be telling jokes at the school and stuff. And they're like, dude, this is a professional school. You got to chill. But I'm around these people. And I'm, at first, I think just ignorant to the socioeconomic differences, the educational and intellect differences. And then I start getting into classes and stuff, and I start getting stressed. I immediately get stressed. I'm like, look, I've done well for myself, but if I get here and I don't perform, then none of that's going to matter. I just have a law degree and won't be making any money. I'll have all this debt. That school was expensive. And I had a scholarship. But
Sounds like it. They had to pay for the piano.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's where all the money went, with Champaign. So I remember the night before my first law school exam, our first semester, in 2010, I did not sleep a lick. I must have slept like 7 minutes or something because I had all this, the weight of the world. Like,
it was on your shoulders.
Your job is going to depend on how you perform in these exams. And these kids went to Harvard, right? You went to a state school in Texas. Like, you're never going to be able to compete. And I came out of that first semester, did well, was top third in my class. And from there, I got opportunities with different firms, the whole nine. But my life has been a bunch of that, right? It's like, you're about to join the fraternity and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be horrible at this. I'm never going to be able to do it. Okay, well, you work it out, right? You get in student government. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be horrible. You work it out. I joined the pre-law program I told you about. Oh, man, you're really studying now. These people have been studying, right? You're not going to be able to figure it out and do better. And so life has just been a bunch of that. And it kind of all culminated in 2019. I ran against who was then the county attorney, so my predecessor. And he had been in and out of public life in elected office for 20 years, right? Wow. So he was a known commodity. He had, strong name ID. People knew who he was. They liked him. And I just took issue with something that he did and how it impacted the black community. I launched a campaign against him, and it was, again, that same thing, like, oh, my gosh. You have never run for office. This guy's run multiple times. He's going to stomp a mud hole in you. And then I beat him. And, won outright on election night with 3 people in the race. And so, life has really been a bunch of that for me. Now, I credit that to a few things. One is just, godly favor, right? I really try to conduct myself like I just ask God, what decision should I make? And I really try to, seek him on decision making. So that's one. 2 is just outworking people. Yeah. I learned when I got into professional life that there are many different buckets of people when it comes to hard work, but the smallest category is people who just really will grind it out and outwork you. And I've tried to be in that bucket. And then the third is learning how to do something before you do it, right? So before I ran a campaign, I learned about the art of running a campaign and what makes you successful and things you should look for, things you should avoid. And I've done that my whole life. When I applied to law schools, just really researched the art of applying to law school. It's different from other stuff. How do you have the best type of application? So those are the 3 things I would say. But, godly favor it has all worked out. And there are days I wake up and I'm just like, goodness, I can't believe it's happened. But I still feel like, okay, there's more to be done though.
Yes, I agree. There's more to be done. Now, so I have a question for you, kind of to unpack what you talked about, the godly favor, which I think is absolutely amazing. But you kind of watching those people that were before you in the political space. So who are some people that inspired you in that political space?
Oh, my gosh. Nobody black could, from my generation, could run for office and not have thought that way about Barack Obama. Okay. I was not involved in politics in high school. And in college, I was involved in running the fraternity, but I didn't think much about politics. Right. I remember Barack's election from 2008. I was a sophomore in college, and we held this big event called Walk for Change. I say big. It wasn't big, but it was big to me. Right. We gathered a bunch of students at the housing dorms on campus, and then we had a camera or 2 come, so it was pretty awesome. Okay. And we walked everybody, a march, from there to the polling site, which was also on campus, right? And it was to elect the first black president. But I remember just the debates, how he conducted himself on the campaign trail. And I remember the whole time I just thought to myself, this dude has a 0% chance of winning. In the primary, I was like, no way. This black guy is about to get elected president. No way. Then he gets out the primaries in the general. No way this black guy is going to win the general election. And then I remember election night. And I'm not a super emotional person. But on election night, there was some state that he won and they called the race. And I remember being in this building on campus and it was electric. I had to go outside and take a breath. I was overwhelmed, right? With emotion. Just, thinking about everything my family's gone through, other families out there have gone through. Knowing the history of this country and how my people have been disproportionately marginalized and racism at every level of government that's institutionalized from the federal government to the state government to local government, blocked from living in certain neighborhoods, given substandard education, blocked from voting, beat, whipped, have dogs sicked on us. All of that was just being internalized in a single moment. And so, Barack Obama is that's someone who's going to have an impact on everybody, right? I mean, you just can't even get over that. But then there are other people, look, you can't discount what Jesse Jackson did for black folks in this country. And the way that he jumped out in the boldness and the fearlessness, Shirley Chisholm, right? Yeah. Just like a slew of leaders who have just really sacrificed the everyday pleasantries of life that we take for granted in order to be about something bigger than themselves. And you see it in some folks from the current generation as well. But my real introduction to politics was Barack Obama. And then fast forward years later, you had, folks like Bernie Sanders running, other people who were like movement builders, right? Created movements. So I've watched closely. But on the flip side, I have been greatly motivated by Donald Trump. Greatly motivated by Donald Trump. I would not be in politics today if Donald Trump were not in politics. No doubt in my mind. I did not plan to run for office this early on. And the only reason I was in a position to disagree with my predecessor on something and to be able to run from there is because I started coming around after Donald Trump won the Republican primary. And I just thought to myself, like, if our country is going to put a guy like that within a stone's throw of the White House, I got to get more involved because I'm obviously not doing my part if folks in our country are comfortable with putting him in a position to run for president. So, I would say Donald Trump's probably had the biggest impact on me of anybody in politics.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I had to scratch my eye on that. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So now let's talk about what's next, the future of Christian, because it's a bright future. I definitely see you as an organizer, so I know people have no problem getting behind you just this time that I've spent with you. So let's talk about the 18th. What does that look like for you? The legacy, such a rich legacy in the 18th.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legacy of fighters, right? Of great fighters who were effective. So we're talking Barbara Jordan, Craig Washington, Mickey Leland, Sheila Jackson Lee, Sylvester Turner, Erica Lee, and now it's open. These are folks who, there's like a core set of things that you can surround, like belief systems with them. Barbara Jordan was so methodical and thoughtful. If you go back and listen to some of her speeches, I mean, the words just came to her so naturally. And she could like give a speech and not raise her voice a single time and would like knock the shingles off the roof, right? Mickey Leland, who was always committed to a collective bigger than just himself, right? That's one thing that's abundantly clear from reading his book, from following him, is he cared about all people, especially black people, right? And was willing to make the sacrifices necessary to be a movement leader. Craig Washington, who's just brilliant. I mean, I'm a lawyer, he's a lawyer. You're just talking about a brilliant trial lawyer, strategist. Even if you talk to him now, I mean, he's just sharp as a tack and just absolutely brilliant. And then you have Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, right? Who everybody in the entire region has a story about Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Democrat, Republican, whatever. You all got a story, right? I have so many stories with her, but one that comes to mind is the night that I won the primary election, the Congresswoman, who, by the way, was the only elected official to pay me any mind when I ran.
Wow.
Yeah, so the first go-around when I ran, I'm challenging an incumbent. Right. And so that's like taboo. You do not do that. Okay. The Congresswoman hit me up 2 weeks before Election Day. And, I don't have the number saved, right? I don't know Sheila Jackson Lee. I'm just a guy. So she calls me, and I get a call from a number that I have, and I answer, and I hear, Mr. Menfee. I'm like, hey, who's this? It sounds like somebody important. This is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And I kind of sit up, perk up a little bit. Right. She wanted me to go to church with her. So she just took me to some churches across town and just like introduced me to people and said like, hey, this young man is going places. And fast forward, the night that I won the primary election, the Congresswoman took me out to TSU. I just won an election. This is the biggest thing ever happened in my life. I'm ready to go home, chill out. And she said, hey, no, I need you to come to TSU with me. So I go out to TSU. Because of some challenges that the county was having in running the election, there were people who were still in line at 11 p.m. who had not yet cast their ballot. Wow. So, and it was horrible. I mean, you had a bunch of news cameras out there. It ended up making national news. It was on CNN. And the Congresswoman was livid. She's just like, how does this happen? Why is it happening at an HBCU of all places? And she looked at me and said, don't you ever forget these people who are standing in this line. That's the type of person she was. Yeah. She just like lived community. Every single thing she did was to help somebody else or to make something a story so that it could help other people. So just a real heavyweight, a titan. And then Sylvester Turner. Sylvester was a friend, a mentor, So both Sheila and Sylvester started at the same law firm that I started at,
Oh,
like
wow.
right back in the 80s. So I met Sylvester back when he was running for mayor the first time, and just developed a great friendship with him. And he taught me so much about politics. When I got elected in 2020, I took office in 2021, and all of a sudden now I'm starting to talk to these people who I had just kind of been in awe of from afar. And he was one of the people who. He always took my call. He always called me to check in. And if he disagreed with something I was doing, he would call me and tell her.
That's good.
He would be like, why are you doing that?
That's
right?
a good mentor.
Sylvester was just like, he had a soft heart and he was brilliant. And that's something I don't want to understate. Sylvester Turner was brilliant. Just an absolute brilliant mind, whether it be how to solve a problem, how to think critically about something, and then how to understand people and how you approach people. And you can't approach everybody the same way. Learn so much from him. So just a very rich legacy, and it's an honor to even have the opportunity to maybe follow in their footsteps.
I love it, and I'm excited for you. So as we kind of come to a close, what is it that you want people to remember? What do you want to be remembered by?
Yeah, I think I thought a lot about this because now that I'm running for a different office, I'm having to go out and talk to people about, the issues and what I care about, what I stand for. I was talking with a member of Congress about polling and stuff, right? He put out a poll, give you a sense of what's going on in the community. And he said, look here, man, the only poll you need to worry about is the grandma at the grocery store. And I thought to myself, I wonder what he meant. Then fast forward a couple of weeks, and I was at HEB, and a woman pulled me aside. She said, are you Christian, Menfee? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, ooh, I love watching you talk because you ain't scared of them folks. And you know what? I thought to myself, if that is what's on the tombstone at the end of the day, I'll take that.
Okay.
I will take it. I think that you're seeing from folks on the far right a fearlessness, a willingness to push out any number of bad policy, of unconstitutional policy, of policy that hurts black folks, gay folks, everybody. And then on the left, I think typically Democrats are seen, or, the narrative that's told about us is that when we're in charge, we don't get stuff done, that folks are scared to stand for what they really stand for, say what they believe in. So what I've tried to embody in this job is courageousness and fearlessness. It doesn't matter if you're the governor, doesn't matter if you're a Fortune 500 CEO, doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States. If you're doing something wrong by a community that I care about, then it's go time.
Yeah.
Whether that be in the courtroom, whether that be in the halls of Congress, doesn't matter where it is. I'm prepared to have that battle. And I think that people acknowledge and admire that. And to be clear, there are generational differences, right?
Yeah.
Baby boomers in the black community, for example, approach issues differently than millennials will. But what I've seen uniformly is baby boomer, silent generation, Gen X, right? Gen Z. Everybody respects when you're putting your money where your mouth is and when you're ready to stand up and fight for what you believe in. So as the county attorney, I've had many opportunities to do that, right? We've sued the state of Texas numerous times over everything from voting rights to environmental justice. You give us an issue where we can go toe-to-toe with Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton, and we've done it. More recently, since Trump got elected, we've sued the Trump administration a number of times over funding for health screening programs, over the layoffs of tens of thousands of federal workers, over cutting trillions of dollars in federal funding. We've been willing to stand up and have those fights. So, when I think about my legacy, and especially now that I have, 2 boys that I'm raising, 3.5 and 1, I think what I want is fearlessness, right? Is not being afraid to speak your mind and to stand up for the things that you believe in. Because, there was a time where, black folks, in order to be treated equally in this country, were willing to just go through the worst type of subjugation, of harm. And over time, we started to integrate and assimilate and get jobs in corporate boardrooms and be lawyers and be able to have the American dream of the house, the 2 cars, and raising your kids and putting them through college. But then we've started to see over the past 10 years, rollbacks of DEI programs, refusal to acknowledge our humanity, right? The ending of affirmative action programs, right? A refusal to acknowledge or to even study reparations, right? Things that should be core to the fabric of this country. And I think that our generation is calling out for leaders who are going to be fearless, who are going to speak, not just say things, but effectively do things. And that's what I'm trying to embody. And I've had the opportunity to do that, tenfold as county attorney. But I think it's necessary in Congress, too. Right now we have a president who is laying off tens of thousands of federal employees, who's stripping federal funding, who's telling people that for 200 years in this country have been considered citizens, that they're no longer citizens, who is deporting people who are legally here and there's no need for them to be deported, who is cutting funding to cancer research programs, including at places like MD Anderson, which save so many lives, right? We are just in a different space in this country. And I think that Congress needs to be prepared to hold the president accountable. And I'll close with this. A couple of weeks ago, I was washing dishes and I was listening to some podcast that was talking about President Trump and how he's committed so many actions that could be considered high crimes and misdemeanors for which he should be impeached, right? And I was thinking to myself, oh man, if Democrats win the House back, they are most definitely going to start impeachment proceedings against Trump. And that'll be like a trial, you know, that's how it is. And I thought to myself, well, good for them. Democrats in Congress really need to hold him accountable in that way. So I go back to washing dishes. And then like 5-6 minutes later, it dawns on me, oh, snap, I could be in Congress then. I better have my ducks in a row. But, you know, we're at a pivotal moment in this country.
Very much.
When I look at my two boys and I think about the opportunity that I had to education, to housing, to all these things that helped me to get where I am today, you know, I worry if they're going to inherit a country that is worse off than what I inherited. And I worry that they're not going to have a fair shot at the American dream or their peers won't. So for me, the battle for the soul of this country is happening right now. And it's happening in Washington, D.C. And one team has Trump and Elon Musk and other folks on it. Our team needs to have fighters, and that's why I'm running for Congress.
Wow. Well, Christian, I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think this was a great conversation because it allowed us to get behind the layers of who you are. You're very relatable. I've left with a lot of good nuggets, and just the fact that you are such a great organizer. I'm excited to see what happens and where you go from here. And thank you for stopping at They Say. You could have done this with anyone, so I'm appreciative of your time. Like I always tell people, there's something we can't get back, and that's our time. So I value people's time. So thank you for spending this time with us to really get a better understanding on who you are and what you represent. And I definitely think this will be helpful to those who are not familiar with you. So thank you so much. And for the next episode of They Say, we'll have another great guest. So see you guys next